Once we decided that was the angle of the design of the quest, the narrative then became, all right, what lesson can we teach here? And it was this sort of conflict between Atreus and his father of, I want to help people, we shouldn't help people, and that's just sort of a rich conflict to explore for the father-son dynamic.
Hey, what's up, PlayStation Blogcasters? This is Aaron Kaufman. I'm the Senior Community Manager at Santa Monica Studio, and we are taking over the PlayStation Blogcast with a new limited miniseries called Worlds Collide. In this limited podcast series, we're bringing together different departments across our studio that collaborated together on a feature to evolve God of War. Now, if you watched our full-length documentary, Raising Kratos, you got a glimpse into our journey reinventing our franchise. On this episode of Worlds Collide, we're going to dig in deep into one of the key critical pillars of God of War, the side quest system. This system truly helped evolve the game. You might remember in past God of War games, with Kratos in the Greek era, we had you on a roller coaster ride going from point A to point B, and now, in our new Norse mythology, we wanted to create a world that let you explore it in a way that you never imagined that could be your own journey. And on that journey, there were many side quests that you could take on at any point in time. The developers who helped put that together across a narrative, level, and system did it in a truly unique fashion. So we really hope you enjoy this episode and learn about the process that helped bring the side quest system to God of War. Enjoy the show. Fellas, why don't we go around the horn here and introduce yourselves?
I'm Anthony DiMento. I'm a senior systems designer, and I worked on the quests in terms of like structure and worked with Luis Sanchez here on pacing for those as well.
I'm Adam Dolin. I'm a narrative designer here, and I did all of the writing for these quests.
My name's Luis Sanchez. I'm the lead level designer, and I oversaw all of the exploration side content in the entire game and worked very closely with these two talented gentlemen.
You guys are so nice to each other. Introducing each other, too.
when we're recording, yes.
I think we liked working with each
No,
other.
that's a joke. We had a meeting yesterday, and we work well together. It's a good team.
So I think, we're here to talk about God of War, but I think it's always fun to kind of get to know each other just a little bit, and for the world out there, maybe we just kind of share a little about, our passion for games, what we're all playing right now. So, Luis, why don't we kick off with you? What do you got in your PlayStation or your mobile or
right now?
Your Switch or Xbox or whatever?
Mobile, I'm always playing Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes. I'm in love with collecting, min-maxing, and Star Wars franchise in general. So I'm always playing that. But in my PlayStation right now, I've got Control, and I'm really liking it. I like the vibe of it. The feeling is kind of unique, and there's nothing like it right now anywhere else. So I'm glad Remedy came with that game.
Yeah, they're getting a lot of praise for that game.
Yep.
Definitely got to get that one going.
I'm playing way too many things. I'm also playing Control. It's great. I got back into Hollow Knight on the Switch, so that's kind of eating all of my time. And then I'm very excited for Link's Awakening and Untitled Goose Game. Both look very good.
Otherwise known as the Unfinished Swan. Otherwise known as Untitled Goose.
To round it out, I finished Control. You guys need to step your games up. So I'm on Judgment right now, the spiritual successor to the Yakuza franchise. And I'll also be playing Link's Awakening probably this weekend.
So to the world out there, we are all very inspired by all the different games that inspire us for what we create here. Awesome, guys. Well, let's jump into this a little bit. I think, for those that are listening in right now, there's, probably across the board, the audience listening in right now from game developers who are, new to the industry, veterans, people that aren't game developers at all. I think something that would be super helpful, Anthony and Luis, maybe you guys can explain a little bit about the difference between your roles as system designer and level designer contributing to exploration.
Yeah, usually to explain it, like if I'm talking to my family who have no idea what I do, and I'm like, I'm a systems designer, I usually make the analogy of like, if we were creating a board game, a level designer would kind of create the board, and the systems designer would make the rules. So from our game, for God of War, I was more concerned with the quests themselves, making sure we had like a varied amount of activities, working with Adam to kind of define character motivations and why we're going to participate in some of the activities we're going to do, working with Luis to kind of figure out where these spaces were in the world, where we were going to pace them out, and how quests could serve them. In that, like, if we have this space well off the beaten path, do we need something to drive the player there? Or do we want them to just kind of discover it naturally? And I don't think there's a right or wrong answer in that. It's just kind of how we want to structure each one of these individually. And then from that kind of high-level idea concept phase, once we know exactly what we're going to do and we've gone through the pitch process and we have sign-off from director level, I would actually go in there and script those events, worked with engineering to kind of design the quest system, build all the messaging, build all the hooks, and kind of make it all work, and then own it until the end of the project and polish it and make sure it's bug-free and enjoyable for all.
Yeah, my analogy for level design when I'm talking to families, think of me as like the architect and the construction crew. So we lay out the blueprints, we kind of plan it all out on paper. Once that gets approved by the city and get all the permits, then we actually go in there and build it in 3D. And then, work with Anthony to, if they build it, they'll come. And then Anthony kind of...
That's your baseball analogy for him, right?
Yeah. And then Anthony makes sure that when you get there and you leave, you feel satisfied. You got a good reward. And then Adam here, while you're in there, the narrative experience has to keep you there and engaged.
And Adam, when Luis is designing, the gray mesh for the levels, and Anthony here is designing the system and how the player is going to have different encounters, where does your role intersect with narrative in terms of the scope, the length, I come around this corner and suddenly I'm going to interact with a character and there's going to be a bit of story. How do you kind of weave in and out between these guys?
I mean, ideally, when you're thinking of a quest, you come up with the story first, and then you write sort of a satisfying center and then a satisfying ending, and then the level sort of builds around that. But that's not how a lot of game development works. A lot of times, the systems and the level designers need to craft a good experience for the player, and then you sort of have to figure out how the story can fit that. And then sometimes we hit upon the perfect, I think the best example is the unfinished business quest with the 4 spirits, where we had this big open, the Caldera, the big open lake, and we needed a way to get the player to go explore it. So you had a spirit who was there's a bunch of spirits around, go collect them. And then the story of that is we shouldn't help spirits. And this happy accident of the lesson here is we should help others. And that wasn't a very good answer to your question. I apologize. But,
no, it's okay. We're actually going off into a better topic. So that's the point of this.
Yeah, I think that quest is probably the most indicative of how the three of us would work together. Where we looked at playtest feedback and we realized that at that first exploration moment of the game, we needed something to drive players around Caldera Lake.
Yeah, so that quest was actually a very late quest.
It was the last
quest.
It was
the last quest that we made.
We snuck
First one
in.
the players see, last one
But
we
it's
implement.
the most important.
Yes.
So Anthony was saying that, playtesting, we saw that we needed to show people, hey, this is a different God of War. The style of this is different. There's something new. There's more to the world to explore. It's not on rails. It's not a linear path.
There's side quests.
So this quest was very important to kind of give the tour of the Caldera to the player and say, there's more to this world than just the critical path.
And then coming back around, once we decided that was the angle of the design of the quest, the narrative then became, all right, what lesson can we teach here? And it was this sort of conflict between Atreus and his father of, I want to help people, we shouldn't help people, and that's just sort of a rich conflict to explore for the father-son dynamic.
Right. And then I can come in from a system side and kind of throw some complexity in there, where I'll work with Adam and say, well, we have a desire that the player, there's 4 islands. We have a desire that the players can do these in any order, right? So that changes the way he has to write these things. If there was kind of a linear path to him, the way the story would unfold would be completely different. But for us, it didn't matter which spirit you found first. The story was going to kind of play out in sequence. So a lot of times Adam will have ideas, and I'm kind of a linchpin between the two of these departments where I can say, hey, we can do this or we can't do this, or make a suggestion of hey, we have these assets. These are the things that I can script in the time that we have. Let's maybe try to do it this way or that way.
From the design side, I kind of had a couple of key things that I never wanted to happen. So one was no fetch quest.
Yeah.
I don't want a fetch quest. And then the other one was, as much as possible, let's let people choose what to do in what order. And that did cause problems and limitations on like narrative and systems.
Yeah, anytime you're designing a story that can be done in any order, it just exponentially increases the complexity of the writing. And we get around that through conditional dialogue.
Yeah.
So the spirit one's a good example because at a certain point, like Kratos says, our only goal is blank. And that line changes depending on where you are in the story. And so I think the theme of this episode is like fitting a quest anywhere. That right there is like the main section that had to be conditionalized based on where you were in the game. And we want to have these like drivers, these motivations, like why are we doing this? It becomes a lot harder once you've completed the game. And that was, I think, you guys can speak more of the design of making sure you can do all the quests at the end of the game. From a narrative standpoint, it's hard. You're sort of butting up against believability of like, why are we doing this? Oh, because we are. I don't remember actually what we used when you complete the game, but our only goal is to go home. That was it. So
maybe it was something like preparing for the journey back home.
Something very thin, but it worked. People still liked it. And
so the reason it was very important to give players that freedom to be able to do anything in any order that they want, for me, it was trying to achieve that thing where you play it one way and then you talk to your friend and having that water cooler moment the next day at work is like, oh, did you go do this thing? Oh, I did. But did you get this line of dialogue? Wasn't it cool when this character said this to this character? And the other person was like, no. Oh, well, maybe it's because you haven't done this other thing. And then you just get those moments, talking to your friends of like, I played it this way, but I played it a slightly different way. And you get different experiences.
It's interesting. We never marketed the game as play the journey your way. We were very, very tight-lipped about the fact that we even had a semi-open world. And all that time, we were basically designing almost a choose-your-own-adventure or like, the path. I didn't even know there was conditional dialogue.
Oh, yeah.
I've never heard of that.
So much.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
It actually was never really a debate for us. I mean, there's plenty of things that we debate here, but I don't think we ever even considered the possibility of, a quest will expire. I think pretty much all of us from the design side, or at least most of us, I would say, approach these problems from a player perspective. And I think any of us who've played a game where a quest became available and you didn't do it right away and then it expired and you failed the quest and it was never available, it feels bad. It's a bummer. Nobody wants that. And it's just one of those things that we never even considered as a possibility. We wanted to maintain that freedom, like Luis. I like those kind of those moments, and we're really only limited in like the amount of scripts, conditional lines we can write, how much I can script those conditionals to trigger, and how much VO we can get to support all that. And I know I personally have never been on a game with the amount of VO we had in the last God of War. So it was like every line we asked for, we pretty much got, and there's just tons and tons of lines that no one has ever heard.
Yeah, too many for me to that make me comfortable thinking about.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the intro to Caldera quest was probably like the simplest example of this, right? Something that served a real purpose, but nothing was more complex than the freedom we let players have with the Valkyries, which I remember, there's 9 Valkyries, so you can do them in any order. And then a lot of conditionals just in terms of like how the player is going to behave. We dealt with a little bit of that on the intro to Caldera quest too, where a player can land on that island. There's a line that Atreus will play of like, look, a brazier. But then they can turn around and leave and not actually do that quest. And we have to kind of save off that variable and know about it when you come back later. And the Valkyries were kind of the most difficult example of this, where you could go into any of the Valkyrie dungeons first. It was an intro on the way down, so we have to have that VO loaded in every single one of the dungeons. That trigger has to be there and check whether or not you've seen a Valkyrie before. To make it even more complicated, you had Muspelheim and Niflheim, where I could have seen a Valkyrie for the first time, even though probably less than 1% of the players actually did that. We still had to account for it, and you could actually kill a Valkyrie in Muspelheim or Niflheim before you killed any of those. And I remember the first time we came in talking about this, Adam came in with this like crazy mad scientist flowchart of like, here are all the things that we're going to need to account for this quest.
I'm still very proud of that flowchart.
How many Excel tabs was it?
What's that?
How many Excel tabs was it?
No, it was just one giant like Google what's it called? Google Shape thing.
I remember you locked yourself in a meeting room and on a whiteboard, you like sketched this all out. And
actually,
it was
that was
very mad scientist.
That was HTTK.
Oh, yeah.
Of the keys, of the different keys that we had to. We could talk about that one. I feel like we're going deep into the woods, but
go deep into the woods.
Briefly, so the HTTK, which is
the Conan's Guard. Yeah, it will always be HTTK.
We
for
have
us internally.
internal names for all of our levels before we figure out like the narrative.
Yeah, I think they called it Hail to the
King. Yeah.
And it was, I don't even know what the mythology was before I got a crack at it.
It's pretty good.
There was a Draugr king that lived in that place.
We literally had we literally had a Draugr with a crown on his head
and red eyes.
Because with exploration content, we're trying to make the most we're trying to make new content with the assets we already have. So we have Draugrs, we have little eye tracers that we can put on them. So that was first pass. Raf Persetti gave us like a little crown to put on this little Draugr, and it was supposed to be about a bandit king, and we built this whole level to make it look like a bandit king type of area. We reviewed it, we built it, we put it in front of Corey, and then one day Corey comes in and he's like, this level's looking great, I love it. Just don't do something stupid like a fucking bandit king or something. Just no bandit king. So we're all just like, what? Like, it's the whole...
So then what happened?
Oh, man.
So then I came aboard.
That's similar to, we should go to Viking Funeral too.
Right.
We have another level called Viking Funeral. Something similar
Guard, right?
Yeah, Guard.
Yeah.
Something similar happened with Corey too, where like we've been working on this level, Guard, and the initial pitch was like, oh, we're gonna do a Viking funeral here. This is kind of like the first Viking funeral ever. And the idea for that level was that there was a boat and the king of that area died, and it'd be a ghost, and he would say, hey, like, I got killed wrongly. Like, can you bring my body's here, but can you bring all the rest of my belongings to this boat? And so you go out, get all his belongings, do it on the boat, kick the boat off, fire an arrow, and then do the traditional Viking funeral. And
whole cinematic planned, everything.
Yeah, we had a cinematic plan.
We had this whole thing planned out.
And months and months of working. Corey reviews these. Everything's great. Awesome. And then near the end, he's like, but we're never going to do a Viking funeral, right? That's just silly. That's ridiculous.
Because we're pre-Viking.
Because we're pre-Viking. And then he said, because Faye's funeral in the beginning, that's our Viking funeral.
Yeah,
that's we define it in our mythology. So we're never going to do that other Viking funeral from.
So if I understood this, you get months. We'll just leave it generically, months. And then Corey comes in, all respect. No,
he's seen it all along the way.
He's seen it all. He's like, awesome. And then he's like, wait a second. And then you guys have to basically revamp it.
I mean, we didn't throw away any like physical work, right?
Yeah,
but like the conversations we had about this cinematic of the whole quest was kind of planned out. We're going to go through this level. We're going to get all this stuff. We're going to get 3 things. We're going to bring them out. We're going to put them on the boat. We're going to shove the boat off. Atreus is going to fire this arrow. Like, it was all planned.
Oh, that's why that dock is out so far.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
so that's why there's a boat there too.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then just no Viking funerals. Whatever you do, no Viking funerals.
That's funny.
But back to Hail to the King,
HTTK.
Like, that was, I think, one of the first major exploration levels you guys worked on.
It is the first exploration level.
And it was kind of like the proof of concept.
It was.
And it's enormous, and it's beautifully designed, but it's designed, I think, different than a lot of the other spaces where there's like 2 pathways. At the end of each pathway, there's a key, and when you get both keys, the main castle opens up. And it became very clear that players could really screw up any sort of narrative we had planned by grabbing a key. Maybe they don't put the key in the pedestal and they just leave, or maybe they grab both keys and then leave.
It was actually, the problem was much more complicated than that, but actually fits into the theme of this podcast really well. Hail to the King was the culmination of the Brock and Sindri quests is what it ended up being. But we were trying to preserve that freedom of do things in any order. So initially, Hail to the King was just always open. I could walk in there anytime. I could do the whole exterior of the level, but without the Brock and Sindri quest, I couldn't actually complete it. So the kind of inelegant solution we had at the time was that there were the 2 keys, but the stone pedestal required 3 keys. And that Brock or Sindri, whenever you started their final quest, they would give you the 3rd key, and that would kind of open up the interior, and then I would be able to complete the quest. When we initially kind of went through this script, Adam had wrote a great script, but didn't include a line of like, hey, the third key isn't here.
Right.
So what we were seeing in playtests where players were going in, they were going there early, they were finding the 2 keys, they were putting them in the pedestal, and they were like, where's the third key? And they'd run around HGTK for like the better part of an hour looking for the third key. They'd get frustrated, they'd leave, and they'd give us really bad scores on the content. So I went in and I just added the line myself in subtitle text. We don't really get a whole lot of temp VO here very early, whether it's Robo or whatever. It's just we usually roll with subtitles for a while. So I had put in my own subtitles within our systems and things that didn't pick it up. So the line never got recorded. So pretty late, and it was either late in alpha or early in beta.
2 days before script launch.
Yeah, I mean, it was late. We realized this line wasn't here, and it just wasn't going to work. I mean, we couldn't do it. So I think Luis is the one who kind of came up with the solution. It was, I think, me, you, and Mark Wynn and our producer kind of sitting around the desk, be like, what can we do in like one day that has 0 art impact? Because we're going to have to block off this level now. We're not going to be able to let you in until you actually start the quest.
Yeah, so that third key, we ended up moving closer to the load hall that leads up to this level. And then that we basically gate you much further, much earlier than we need to. So we didn't let you go into the level without having that final third key. Yeah. And then players wouldn't, lose hours. Like
literally threw a door up. Yep. We had a giant door we were using somewhere else. We pulled in John Polomarchuk, who is the lead environment artist for exploration. We were like, dude, we need a door. So we took this door from somewhere else. I don't remember where it was. And like within the hour, John P. put it on screen and was like, here's the door. And we're like, this looks great. This looks like it was supposed to be here. It looks like it was always supposed to be here. So production had, we still had to go through the processes of production, had to vet this. We had to run it through art, make sure there was no additional art impact. Thankfully, that little stone pedestal is modular enough where we could just stick a new stone pedestal outside of the new door. So we lost the freedom that we had initially wanted with HGTK of letting you go there early. But I think in retrospect, it's actually a better gameplay experience. I don't think you would have got much from going there early.
Well, there's always trade-offs, right? And that's something we should talk about too, right? Like we wanted complete freedom, but we can't have that. And then, Adam, to tell a better story, would prefer it not be totally open-ended. So with this one, I think because it was gated, we got a better culmination to the whole Hold Your Brothers quest. So that was a trade-off, and that's fine.
Right.
Yeah, we make compromises all the time, but it's always for the best.
Yeah, knowing that you couldn't do the quest, you couldn't do the content without the quest active, Adam doesn't have to write things that are just totally ambiguous, right? Or, God forbid, do half of that content in complete silence.
Right.
And, we have to do that sometimes. We have to say, okay, the player doesn't know what they're doing right now, so rather than kind of say something very specific, we say something very generic. And I think you lose something there, so there is a bit of the trade-off. But, yeah, I'd say my other favorite story from XPL and kind of gating that freedom and pulling back from where we were was the day we walked in and you had placed the snake's body as blockers basically throughout all of Caldera Lake.
It was just 2 blockers. I wouldn't say all over the lake.
Changed a lot. Yeah, I think production lost their minds a little bit. Coming and seeing that in a director's review without knowing it was coming.
Where did that come from? Is that when the lake lowers and then the body of the snake is around the lake? I mean, how did you...
Yeah, so it's the first time the water lowers. And, I mean, that lake is ginormous. It's big. And so we had that problem where we gave players freedom to go everywhere, but some of that content wasn't available until the second water drop. So people would go out there, spend their time boating over there, and not really have any meaningful things to do or complete. And so then they would, view it as a waste of time and give us bad scores during play testing. So I just sat there and I was like, how do I fix this? I was like, well, I have to block that whole area. But this late in the game, how am I going to do that with, little impact to other departments? And I was like, well, we have this giant snake. And it just moved all over the place to displace this water. I could just put pieces of the snake and block areas that I don't want you to go to yet. and it worked. And it was cheap, and Art loved it. We loved it because it improved our scores.
I didn't even notice. Like, it just seemed natural to me playing the game.
No, it's one of those moments that is rare in game development where it's like, yes, it's perfect.
Yeah, it was perfect. And if it was the mythology, it also reinforced the mythology, because now when you try to build it out there, you can actually get close to one of the snake pieces and kind of appreciate that art. So it was a win-win all around.
And I do think, remembering writing lines of, like, if you go closer to the body, he's like, oh, the snake's body's all the way over here. So, like, that's just nice, like, narrative reinforcing, like, the snap decisions.
World building.
Yeah.
But I think, like, we had a lot of really happy accidents like this. We kind of got really lucky in a lot of ways because, like,
I would disagree with that.
Okay.
Obviously, we were, like, you know, kind of inventing as we went because we haven't done this before. It's new to the franchise. But I mean, there's problems that we face, but we sit down and we think about it, and
a lot of problem solving.
We had a good plan. We had a good plan. Yeah. I mean, I know you and I sat in rooms for hours just looking at timeline and pacing and figuring out the plan, because a lot of it wasn't always just like get it on screen first. It was like have the plan, and then when we get it in there, we get, you know, 1, maybe 2 shots at it. That
was something I found really interesting, was with the Witch's Bone quest of, I think originally it was Water Drop 2.
It was originally Water Drop 1, and then it moved to Water Drop 2.
And then it moved to 2.
Right.
And it was originally 5 bones, and then...
Too many bones.
And it was too many bones.
Yep.
But, like, I had written, like, a story that I felt was, like, really well-paced, and I thought it was at the right time, because it was potentially before you go to Alfheim. And then when it was shoved into... Not shoved, that's a strong word. When it was placed gently into Water Drop 2.
After lots of careful planning.
And condensed into 3 bones, I think it made that quest just a lot tighter because it came at the right time in the critical path, assuming players did it as soon as the water dropped. And cutting it down to 3 bones made the story a little tighter. And just the amount of shifting that you did with the side quests and when they would become available made my job difficult, but made the content, in retrospect, made the content a lot better.
Yeah, I think my philosophy was always, with exploration in general, was we have to be quick, we have to be agile, and we have to be able to, like, tune and change things like on a dime, like turn on a dime.
Which is hard when you have a story that you're very attached to. And you have 2 extra beats of a story that now are suddenly gone. But I think we were able to salvage a lot of that with, like, the boat banter in between the bones.
Yeah, we play tested the game a lot, and having that feedback from players and looking at data and looking at scores and seeing the telemetry of you know, when they explored, how much they explored, and then that's what drove all of the changes.
I think there were enough comments of, like, these are too many bones. Was like, okay, well, then we should probably lower them.
So when you remove some of the bones, you go from 7 to 5?
5 to 3.
5 to 3, excuse me. Just walk me through the workflow of how that kind of touches all of you guys at the same time.
I think we have a playtest. Playtest data comes back, says there's too many bones. Luis says, hey, Adam, there's too many bones. We're going from 5 to 3. I think there was, like, a slightly contentious email chain. But then we all talk about it, and I get convinced, and then I look at the script and see, okay, like, this beat is not the most important beat. Maybe this can become boat banter. I'll take out these 2 beats, shove this here into boat banter. Here's a new script with only 3 bones. And then I guess that goes to scripting, and you script that dialogue.
Yeah, basically, I think we just dropped one of the other hands and one of the other feet and and called it a day.
Yeah.
I think Adam had some, like, creepy lines where the guy was like, "Oh, Golvig's feet," and I was like, "This is all right. We can lose this." But I mean, it wasn't a ton of extra work for me. I think I was probably looking at it of just like I think the choice to move it from Water Drop 1 to 2 was maybe, I don't know, impacted me a little bit more. Because then I just have to move, like, the pickups, I have to move the quest giver, I have to make sure that they're positioned in the right way, especially because that one had a little bit extra of, we had that moment where I turn the quest in, the quest giver goes away, the bones kind of animate up.
You had to do all that yourself.
Yeah, we had to, my first pass animation of those bones kind of coming in were like just me doing an animation in Maya, and anatomy is not my strong suit, so I think I had like a clavicle backwards or something, and it looked really, really bad to the point where one of the animators was like, dude, like, just let one of my guys fix this. This looks awful. But like, again, with exploration, we had to be scrappy with some of these things. Like if I didn't go in and put in my own animation, like nobody would have seen it. And then they would have been like, this looks terrible. Let me make this look good. And even little things too. Like we just started with like normal bones, right? And then Raph sees that and he's like, well, why are they normal bones? You said she was burnt. Let me get you a texture swap and make these bones look like they were burnt, right? And have some scorch marks on them and stuff. And all those little details kind of start to add up to make this thing a lot better. I will say, like, these two guys in particular, but the whole studio made my job much, much easier and really made the work I did look good, way better than anything I could have done without them. But yeah, I think you're on to something good when that stuff starts to happen, right? Where people see the work and they're like, hey, let me add in my little piece here. Let me add something here. We talk about that all the time, whether it's quest pitches or the implementation themselves. You have a good idea when you can see the excitement in the other people in the room and they start, well, what about this? Well, oh, yeah, that's cool. Well, what if we did this too? Or what if we added this? And
yeah, I think the narrative is always better served when level and systems help make it stronger. Like if you, my favorite example of this is in Celeste, when you are like chasing this other piece of yourself, or she's chasing you rather, and in the game you have one dash, and then spoiler, Celeste, sorry, when you like reconcile, now you have two dashes, and it's just this really beautiful concept of like the system design helping to better serve the narrative, and it feels more emotionally impactful if the game that you're playing responds to the actions that you take. And I think, Luis, you had a concept that you always want to have like a state change in a game. That's always something that feels good.
Yeah, for me, like whenever a player can impact the state of the world, like that's powerful, right? Yeah. Like just the water drop itself. You blowing that horn, having the snake come over again, and then the water drops one more time, and you're like, whoa. But now every time you come back to Caldera, you see that, and you're like, oh, I did that. I changed the world.
But even as simple as like lighting the braziers to do that, like it's not a very big thing. It's just a brazier, and now it's lit, but it still makes it's like, oh, I've done that.
Yep. They're always lit now. Yeah. You've changed the world, and it's a lasting change. Yeah. Baldur's Dragon, too. Just adding that to Caldera, right? Like, very cool, right? It's like my impact on this world is visible, and it's lasting.
And then another kind of concept that I always kind of try to drive home with exploration was like, let players have questions and mysteries. Like with that dragon, the Boulder Dragon, that happens during the critical path. And then you get shoved right into Helheim. But if someone remembers, like, I wonder what happened to that dragon. And you go looking for it. And then it's there, like, the amount of satisfaction you get through that, for that, is like through the roof.
Yeah.
And again, it's a good example of how our three departments worked well together, right? Where Luis wants to get that dragon in, and then he can come to me, and I have this luxury of being like half quest designer, half systems progression designer. And he's like, well, I want to get something for it now. It's there, but I want to reward the player if they go over and look at it. Like, give me a dragon's tear or a dragon fang or something like that. And that's easy enough for me to create and then work it into the economy and make it part of a recipe and something like that. And, there were tons of things like that, whether it was just adding a new resource or then Adam coming in and being like, well, okay, like, here's the history of that resource. And from a progression standpoint, my favorite items in the games are the ones that we could contextualize like that. So everything's kind of working in harmony, whether it was the dagger you got from the father who was betrayed by his son, we turned that into a weapon component and it looked like a little knife. And then the FX team comes in and they put this little blood drip FX on it. And Adam wrote some lore for it of like, this is the dagger of betrayal. And we did it with the Thor statue as well.
Oh, where the you dug it up handles,
Grippatanagast. And like those were the coolest items for me. Those are things that as a player I'm going to remember where I got it. I'm going to want to use it and I'm going to keep that in my inventory. I'm not going to scrap it. I'm not going to sell it.
And there's some that we wanted that we didn't get, like the boat captain's key.
We boat captain. Well, we got like a lore.
So
geometry in there. But yeah,
Well,
we
he
wanted
was
to
like-
keep.
an item.
Yeah.
Speaking like
Unvari's ring.
Yeah, well, like the dragon, and you see the dragon. It wasn't until like I did like late playthroughs when the game was actually like running well and the environments were coming together, where I would boat around and I would see like the shipwreck island, and you get to the top of the shipwreck, and there's nothing there. And I was like, well, there should be something here, but we don't have any time, so let's just make it like a journal entry from a captain.
Yeah,
you know?
to Luis's point, this is a regret of mine. We wanted that boat captain's key. For anyone who doesn't know, there's a boat captain that's been referenced in every God of War franchise, every single game since the first. And we were going to take a key out of that chest on Shipwreck Island. We were going to turn it into a hilt for the axe, and it was going to look like a little key. It was going to be totally sweet, but we ran out of time.
And Raph was on board.
Raph was on board.
He's always on board, though.
Yeah.
Is there art for this key?
We just didn't get the art for the key. I think is what kept us from doing it. But that would have been sweet. And then what was the other one?
Unvari's ring.
Oh, right. And then the ring that talks to you in Brock 2. We wanted to like turn that into an equipable piece of loot.
Can't even do enchantment though, right?
No, we didn't do anything with it.
We wanted to.
Yeah,
but
we
just
wanted to.
ran out of time.
Like I had dreams of like turning that into a talisman that like just would talk to you throughout the game if you kept it equipped.
And Corey was on board with that too,
He
if I
was,
remember.
yeah.
Yeah.
He was.
Just a time thing.
Yeah.
Just a time thing.
He wanted a whole bunch of extra dialogue.
Right.
Because the kid can hear what the ring is saying.
Right,
and then the kid would just be talking to himself. And
Right.
Chris would be like, what are you doing, boy? Shut this ring up.
Yeah.
Yeah, like a more lightweight implementation of that is like a treasure hunter type of item, like something that like buzzes when I'm close to a hidden artifact or a chest or something like
That's
that.
a great idea.
I just ran out of time.
When you guys
Maybe someday.
we should merchandise a talking ring.
We should.
Oh yeah.
I'd buy it.
Yeah. If we think a little bit broader, this is kind of the nucleus of exploration in this room here. But when you guys are even just at the inception of designing a quest, what's kind of the workflow from, concept to scope to approval to, hey, Luis, you're walking over to Anthony, like, can you put a dragon in there? Like, how does that work, with the rest of the team where you guys get kind of the green light to do it?
I think like Anthony's been saying all along with exploration, we have to be a little bit more scrappy and kind of think about how do we build things smarter and faster and reusing a lot of things that we already have that we know we're going to get for the main story. So like dragons, we knew we were going to have dragons. And for that, in that level that we saw, it was the Viking funeral one where we weren't going to get the Viking funeral. And I just looked at the existing layout. And the intro to that level is a very narrow staircase leading up. And I said, this is perfect for gameplay right here. This is the only thing that's missing here. Like, what if we make this a little bit more dangerous? Like you're avoiding some kind of hazard. And I was like, what if we put a dragon at the top and it's breathing fire down this narrow staircase? And then we build out cubby holes and then you're dodging that and you just have to time it going up the hill. And everyone was like, yeah, that sounds cool. And then I just do the legwork. I go talk to the animators. Like, can we reuse this dragon and put him over here? We have the attack of the fire. Can we reuse that? And they're like, yeah, that'd be easy. So it's just about being smart, talking to other departments, collaborating, getting people excited. That's half the battle right there. And that's how that dragon came to be. And they were like, all right, let's get 2 more.
Yeah, you do it once, do it 2 more times.
Yeah.
And let's make a quest out of it.
Yeah, that one, the way it came together in particular is pretty awesome.
That's
added,
one of my
added a whole
proudest
lot.
moments.
Yeah, that one worked out really nicely.
That's the level that's in our TV spot at the end.
Mm-hmm.
And originally the TV commercial, I was part of that. Instead of Kratos fighting against Draugrs at the end there, and then you see the dragon flying out in the distance, it was going to be in reverse. You were going to have Kratos going up like he is in the game to fight the dragon. I remember seeing that storyboarded, talking about it. So it's an amazing moment.
Cool. Yeah, and once that's in, we just continue to iterate. Then it was like, well, how do we release the dragons?
Yeah.
And we go through multiple discussions and iterations on those. And VizDev makes this little totem, and somebody creates the ethereal chains that bind them. And then I remember super late, there was no kind of camera shot. Like I think we added the middle interact, right? So that you break the 3 locks and then you go and interact with something in the end, so that he just doesn't fly off with you not ever seeing it.
Mm-hmm.
And then we found people were still not seeing it. So I had to go up and talk to our camera design lead, Errol, and be like, hey, I need people to see this moment. And him and Renee went in and were like, okay, let's frame this properly, right? And how long are we going to hold the player in place? And what are you going to see? And then when does the Quest UI pop? And like I've been saying, then all those little details from all these different people who had a hand in it kind of come together and make something really cool. So, yeah, I mean, that collaboration is key. And, whether it's starting from like a really simple place of a 2-sentence pitch of like, here's what we think would make an interesting quest, to going all the way to something as crazy as 3 dragons and
3 dragons that you don't fight. You free them.
Yeah, I mean, there's just tons of people who had their hands in all of this, and everybody just really cared about the work and put everything, they had into it, and turned out pretty okay.
How did you guys, again, going a little bit higher level, but the whole conceit of the game is Kratos and his son on this incredible journey together to spread the mother's ashes, and it's all about their bond and their relationship together. When you guys are concepting the side quests, or the exploration quests, I should say, what's the flow of approval where, it's like it's given the green light, it's like this feels like it belongs, it's connected to the narrative? And I know there's varying degrees of that. There's what you, Anthony, call the A, B, and C, and even the D quests. Like, how do you guys come up with those? How do you gauge if they belong or not?
So at a high level, for me, any content that we had to support the 3 main game pillars. So any piece of exploration you find either directly has something to do with combat, the narrative, or just pure exploration, curiosity, and rewarding that curiosity. So high level, that's kind of where we start everything.
In terms of narrative, Matt Sophos and Rich Gobert, our narrative leads, kind of gave a mandate to me pretty early that every quest should have some kind of lesson associated with it, which once I framed the quest in that light, they became a lot easier to write, of like, what is the lesson here? Is Kratos teaching his son, that honor and virtue is important? Is he teaching him that, like, you shouldn't trust spirits? And then seeing what the actions of the quest were. For instance, like the Thor statue is going to be you destroying a statue of this god. And the lesson there is don't trust the gods. Once you sort of frame the lesson, the theme of that quest, it just makes it easier to write.
I think the first quest meeting we had was me, Luis, and Rich Gobert. And I think the first thing we started with were like, well, hey, what are the things that we can do in this game from an activity standpoint? And looking at those 3 pillars as well. I mean, we can kill stuff, we can break stuff, and we can like go get stuff. And I know Luis is like super anti-fetch quest. And, some of those quests we had that were kind of fetchy were made better because they had really, really solid narrative support, like Adam was saying. But from that initial meeting, we talked about some of those things. We talked about some of those activities. Rich Gobert left over the weekend, came back on a Monday and was like, here's a whole bunch of pitches. We went and looked at all those pitches. We picked out some that we liked. We put them in front of Corey in a meeting. He kind of talked about the ones that he liked. In some cases, we took 2 different pitches and smashed them into one and made them into, a singular type of quest. And then I think a lot of the early questions we were asking and problems we were trying to solve were, what is Kratos' motivation for doing this quest? You have a protagonist here who isn't known for wanting to help people. I mean, last time we had seen him, he just burned like an innocent man in a cage so that he could like pull a lever, basically. So we kind of leaned on Atreus for a lot of that. I had a pitch like really early on about these just general father-son moments. It didn't pan out, rightfully so, but we were able to kind of take some of that concept and apply it to the side quests. For A quests like Brock and Sindri, the quest is a lot about the relationship between those 2 people, right? Kratos' relationship with other people in the world and how do we kind of push that forward. But if you look at a lot of games, I mean, the quests are about the NPCs, they're about the people you're interacting with, and we really only had those 2 guys. And they also had heavy narrative constraints, which made them difficult to use in a lot of situations. So the unfinished business guys kind of came about of like, well, these guys it'll allow us to put NPCs in the game. We can kind of flesh out the world, but that still wasn't enough, right? So it came down to Adam and the narrative team kind of finding a wrapper, kind of a mega theme for what these quests are all about. And I think they nailed it in saying that it's about Kratos, it's about father and son, which is one of the core pillars of the game. So regardless of the activity you're doing, whether it is kind of fetchy, like picking up bones or doing something else, it's supporting that core pillar of father and son. And I think that's what makes it work and what makes, these, like I said, the support from these two guys and their departments in particular really made my life easy.
Awesome. My last question, which might be kind of the traditional for our Worlds Collide podcast here. Let's go around the horn real quickly and just think, if you could take your DeLorean and go back in time, if there's, one thing that you either wish we had time to do or that you could improve now that the game's been out a year and a half and change, what would that be for each of you in your kind of respective departments?
I only have one. The Witch's Bones quest. There's a bone on an island that has another quest giver, and I realized that too late to bring it up, because now if you're on the Witch's Bones quest and you collect that bone, you can then start a new quest.
By design.
By design.
It is by
rightfully
design.
so. Yeah. But then you miss one of the lines of dialogue of the Witch's Bone quest.
Look at this guy. He's worried about the one line. Made for a better gameplay loop.
To be fit to, Luis brought up a good point. Is like other people are going to experience that differently. They're going to get that new quest first, and then they're going to collect the bone, and then they'll hear that bone quest. However, they'll also miss a line of boat banter from the captain quest. So you really can't win.
Oh boy, but there's content, right? Like, think about it this way: if that thing wasn't there, if they didn't pick up a new thing while going for the other thing, they wouldn't find that new thing.
No, you're right.
Yeah, maybe they would have missed that whole quest and wouldn't have heard any of those lines. So.
You guys have convinced
We did you a favor.
For me, I'll give you two answers. Something that we didn't do, and I'm glad we didn't do. We had a third water drop. A lot of people don't know that.
I didn't know
when
that.
we originally started, there was 3 water drops, and at some point, we're like, that's too much. And I'm glad we didn't do it. I think 2 was a perfect amount of water drop and amount of content. But the thing that I wish we could have done was we had to cut one island. There's always stuff you cut because you don't have enough time to fully polish it. So it's just I wish we had time to do those things. There's one island that we cut and another large open area like Vathagard and HTTK. It was called the Mason Trail, and it was awesome. And I wish we could have done that one.
Kind of shrunk down to the Mason Trail cave, right?
It did. It got shrunk down to that
one
cave.
of the dragons was.
Fafnir was hanging
3
out.
dragons were supposed to be in these large open air areas. And so 2 of them are, and one of them isn't. And I wish that one could have had a big home as well.
I think the Mason Trail, if I recall now, it was either E3 16, maybe it was E3 17. I think that where that quest was at the time was going to be our way of showing exploration to the world. We were actually going to announce it then, and then we decided not to, and then we held it, all the way to the very end. And obviously that was a year later, so it changed significantly. But I remember that.
Yeah, I have tons of regrets, in a good way, But there's always no, so many. But yeah, I mean, we talked about not getting Anvari's ring as an equipable item, just things like that. There's always. It always feels like there's more you could have done, but eventually you have to stop and you have to ship the game and you have to get it out there. The one that nags at me a little bit is we never. I don't know if people know this, but we never planned on doing New Game Plus. It was not in the cards. The way we structured a lot of progression, I was like, if we try to do a New Game Plus, this isn't going to work. And we're not doing New Game Plus. Don't be ridiculous. And then when the game came out, everyone's like, when's New Game Plus coming out? And directors came over to me and were like, hey, we're doing New Game Plus now. And I was like, oh, God. But the one thing I wanted to get in as part of that New Game Plus thing, to go back to the quests, was I wanted a way to fight the Valkyries again. And we had a really good way to do it, at least I thought, where we had that Valkyrie Council. You had already put all the helms on all the seats. And what I wanted to do was be able to go back there after you defeated the Queen and interact with any of those chairs and then res that particular Valkyrie to fight them within the Valkyrie arena. I thought that would have been pretty neat, but then I had a baby and I went out on paternity leave and we ran out of time. See, it was just regrets, man, regrets. No, I'm just kidding.
But you know what? That's a really good point about our work-life balance here at Santa Monica Studio, right?
Yep. No, it was great. I took my time.
Babies over Valkyries.
Yeah.
Let's take advantage of your personal life to talk about our work-life balance.
Sorry, everybody. But we could always do more. So there's always some regrets.
Awesome, guys. Well, I'd say this was a pretty damn successful first episode. We'll probably sit here and talk for another
Easily.
Yeah, for sure.
days.
Easily.
So just want to thank you guys, tremendously. If there's any last words you guys would like to say to all the fans and everybody out there.
Thanks for playing and making all those nice comments.
Yeah, thank you so much. I see all the love and I appreciate it. And it makes me, hungry to come back here to work and do it all over.
Yeah, I mean, I think we recognize this content was all optional. You didn't have to play it. So if you made the choice to play it, thank you. Thank you for exploring with all of us.
If you're interested in working here at Santa Monica Studio, we are actively hiring for our next project. You can learn about our studio and more about all of our open roles on our official site at sms.playstation.com. And if you're one of the many fans out there that wants to engage with us, you can follow us on Twitter at Sony Santa Monica or on Facebook, LinkedIn, or Instagram at Santa Monica Studio. If you enjoyed this episode of Worlds Collide, please hit that subscribe button wherever you might be listening to this podcast. From everybody here at Santa Monica Studio, thanks for listening.
Hey folks, this is Sid Schumann from PlayStation Blogcast. We hope you enjoyed this special episode of the show, which gave an inside look at Santa Monica Studio, creators of God of War. We'll see you next week with a normal edition of PlayStation Blogcast.